I'm very distressed about the fact that we are unable to conduct the important business of this board when we're not having a quorum. And I know that emergencies exist, especially in funeral service. But to that end, I'm going to ask, we have on this meeting dates, we have the August, September, October, November, and December meetings that are listed on there with the time and the dates. I'm not going to make any changes at this point. I would like to wait until we get an executive director named on that, so I'd like to stand pat on that, but I'm asking now if there's any board member that has any trouble with any of the dates that are on there right now.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any trouble, but I think certainly you alluded to this, that in the future, maybe we could consider, the board could consider as an agenda item, having the board meeting at a different date and a different time.
And there's been some discussion about that by different members because of certain conflicts and also being able to review the agenda and have the appropriate time. But I think we probably need to settle into some things now, and more importantly, because I'll be honest with you, I'm not going to go through this again where we have to put licensees off. I got phone calls, I got texts, I got emails, and I don't blame them because these people could not run their businesses because they had people that could not get their licenses, which is wrong. So if it happens again, I'll be calling a special meeting, which is under my right to do as president. We'll just keep having meetings until we get a quorum.
And so perhaps then we could request that the interim executive director put on the agenda, a future agenda, the discussion of the modification and change of the dates and times that we have future board meetings.
Yes. I've also asked our interim director to take a look at our policies and procedure manual for new board members and policies. We are unable to find some of them in the last 2 days, so I'm asking staff to work with him and try and put that together, and we'll deal with it as we go on, and hopefully we'll be able to locate those and kind of get those updated. As far as the calendar goes, going back to that though, I will be asking, since it's appropriate for licensed members of the board to conduct the apprentice interviews, August was supposed to be Mr. Washko, Mr. Chandler. Of course, Mr. Washko has resigned his position on the board. Mr. Chandler is not here today. So I'm going to be calling Mr. Chandler. We have approximately, according to Ms. Linda, 19 apprentices coming in August. I do not want any glitch here, so I'll be asking Mrs. Pugh and Mr. Wapner to fill in, but I'm going to check with Mr. Chandler also. And then I will, September, we're covered with Mr. Wapner. And September, I think you told me, do we have 9?
9 or 10, yes.
And I'll be here to help, with some of that, but you'll be there. October, we don't have that number yet.
I don't have that number yet, but I will provide it for you soon.
Yeah, Mr. Chandler, and then we'll fill in December when we get to that point.
Mr. Chairman, one other item while we're on that topic.
Yes.
I think we also had recently experienced an issue with our ability to schedule a special meeting. I think there was a 5-day minimum rule, and I would certainly ask both council and our interim executive director to review this policy to see if that can be modified so that the constituents, people that depend on this board, can have their services provided in a timely fashion. I would look to modifying this rule with 24-hour notice.
And, JCAR coming up, that's probably where that's going to fit in, I'm assuming. Again, I'm not certain if that's in the rule or the law. It's a law?
It's a rule.
It's a rule. It's a rule. So we would have to, we cannot amend rules.
You have to go through the JCAR.
We have to go through the JCAR, which I think we're going to be going through. Again, And I will say this, Ms. Niekamp did indicate to me that she left a list somewhere of possible things that needed to be looked at with the J-car. Again, we cannot find that. I've asked Eric to look into that and see if we can find her listing. One thing, of course, we all know as board members that a law trumps a rule every time. So there are some discrepancies there. In other words, I believe it's in the rule that you need to have a manager that can only manage one funeral home, but then that was superseded by the law in 2013 that you can have more than one person. So again, remember the old saying, a law trumps the rule every time. Is there any further business to come before the board?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have a couple of other items. While we're on housekeeping and cleaning up some items, it was also, as you folks saw in the minutes that we approved for the May 16th, there was an attachment about the Ohio Administrative Code and the duties of the officers in specifically 4717-2-03. C as in Charlie indicates that the Secretary-Treasurer of the board shall supervise the executive director. I think that should be the chairman. I don't think it should be the Secretary-Treasurer. So I would also add that, or ask the interim executive director to add that to the laundry list of things for modification.
Can I make one point there, though, that he also, the Secretary-Treasurer, though, is charged with checking hours and so forth. That should remain, I think, as is, Secretary-Treasurer.
Well, I know on the cosmetology board, as chairman there, the executive director reports his hours for review and approval to me.
Okay. Well, and you know what? That's on the J-car list there, so you guys will have lots of input there.
Mr. Chairman, one other item, if I may move on.
Yes.
Okay. I think that this board also adopted a teleworking policy. It involves the ability of an executive director to work off-site. I never liked that. The reasons why I didn't like that is, number one, verifiability, number two, accountability, but most importantly, access and supervision of the employees. If the executive director is working at home, then who's supervising the staff and the employees here? So I would also ask our interim executive director to take a look at that and revise that as well.
That's a policy we can't find. I apologize for that.
Okay. The other item that I would ask, Mr. Chairman, that the interim executive director and our council take a look at is a clarification of what exactly our record retention policy is. You will recall that the dispatch did an expose article on prepaid funeral fraud, which led me to inquire after I was appointed on the board about the emails that went back and forth between the former executive director, Ms. Niekamp, and the Columbus Dispatch. There were different sets of emails that were provided to me by the dispatch. Those emails did not match the emails that Ms. Niekamp provided. When this board member attempted to obtain, through a public records request, those emails from Ms. Niekamp, I was told that Ms. Niekamp had deleted those emails. So again, I'm going to ask the interim executive director and Ms. Bachbrader to take a look at and come up with a record retention policy to avoid this type of problem in the future. Also, Mr. Chairman, there's I believe the board policy manual on page 20 authorizing executive director to negotiate settlements. That I'm going to ask the interim executive director and Ms. Bachbrader to clarify once and for all that should not be the case, because I think that is the unauthorized practice of law. And while we're on that topic, there was a attorney-client privilege memo that was provided to this board dated July 22nd, 2015. This memo dealt with the unauthorized practice of law. I believe in transparency, I believe in accountability, and I believe the public has a right to know whether or not the executive director did in fact engage in the unauthorized practice of law. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make a motion that we waive the attorney-client privilege on the Attorney General memo that was provided to our board dated July 22nd, 2015.
Mr. Wagner, did you get all that motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, the motion's just on waiving the attorney-client privilege.
On the memo dated July 22nd, 2015.
July
22nd, 2015, regarding the unauthorized practice of law.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Pugh. Is there any further discussion? I know you're going to have a comment, so I guess I'll let you comment first.
Okay. As you said, I think you're good. The Attorney General's advice is generally across the board that we recommend that you not waive attorney-client privilege. It is your choice to do so. You can do that against my advice, but my advice is not to waive that. I don't have the memo in front of me.
I can provide
so
you with.
That's fine, but I generally would not advise that you do that. Waiver can sometimes be broader than what you intend it to be, and even though you might just be waiving that one memo, it could be considered to be about that entire topic by a court, and it could impact other things. But if you want to do that, it is your privilege, it is yours to waive the full board. It has to be by a valid vote of the board.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could add, we have in the past, on rare occasion, waived the attorney-client privilege on certain items. I'm not certainly advocating that we make this a habit, but the public deserves to know.
I know on my short time on this board, we've waived it twice. I think, actually, your situation, didn't we, with a couple months ago, and then I believe there was one other time. And again, Ms. Bachrader is correct. We were warned that is frowned upon by the AG's office, which I understand. But I also believe in transparency. So that being said, I just want all the board members to understand, though, that we do that as a group because that affects all of us. Any further discussion on this motion? Hearing none, then I'll ask that Mr. Wagner call the roll.
Mr. Tanner.
Yes.
Mr. Dodson.
Yes.
Mrs. Pugh.
Yes.
Mr. Reddick.
Yes.
Mr. Wapner. No. Motion passes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to read into the record one of the last paragraphs of the July 22nd, 2015 memo. I only have my copy that I've
Would
written
you be
notes on.
providing us copies of that?
I would ask the Attorney General, I couldn't find a clean copy, but I'd ask our Assistant Attorney General to provide a copy of a clean copy to the memo. I don't want to pass out a copy with my notations because then it could be argued that this was not in fact a true and accurate photocopy of the memo. But I will read to you the second paragraph from on the last page, second paragraph from the bottom. This office is concerned that the executive director's actions constitute the unauthorized practice of law, and it is our duty to inform the board of this concern and advise that the board specifically delineate the executive director's role with regard to settlement negotiations so that the board is in full compliance with Ohio law. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Please make sure that the secretary has a complete copy of that to be in the record so that we don't have happen what we had last month. Any further items that need to come before this board? Hearing none, then, I would love to entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved by Mr. Dodson. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote.
Mr. Wapner, yes. Mr. Tannen?
Yes.
Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mrs. Pugh?
Yes.
Mr. Reddick?
Yes,
Motion carries.
I declare this meeting adjourned at 2:39 PM. Thank you all for your service. Appreciate it.